Hello, hello.
Yeah, we'll just give it a second for people to start trickling in.
Oh, got it. I see.
Yeah, I also have to click go live on Instagram. Here we go. But yes, be aware, people can hear us right now.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Streaming software has made big progress in recent years. Here we go.
Okay.
I see people are starting
Yeah, I think it's happening on Substack, which is
to
good.
join. All right, then let's do this. Noah, what's going on?
Justin, how are you?
Good. How are you doing today?
Good to see you, man.
For everyone watching, listening, this is a random little collaboration. Noah and I just got to talking and thought it would be fun to try some kind of, I don't know, live cultural affairs discussion conversation show. I think both of us have been hard at work on various things. Noah's novel is now out and my book is finishing as well. And so I think we both just kind of wanted to come up for air a little bit and kind of get in the mix for fun. And we don't necessarily have any big ambitions behind this, although who knows? I don't know. We'll see. We just wanted to try something. And so we're streaming to multiple destinations. And today we just wanted to kind of talk about some of the big topics in the culture in the past week. Noah and I are kind of, I would say, somewhat similarly positioned in that we're both kind of, have one foot sort of in the tech world and one foot in the, let's call it the East Coast, kind of traditions of arts and letters, perhaps we could say. And so I've always enjoyed talking with Noah, and yeah, I thought this would just be fun to come up for air and see what's cooking in the culture, right, Noah?
Yeah, good to be here. Live video is the future.
Yeah. So this
Seems
is
to me anybody can be a talking head.
Yeah, totally. So this is going to Noah's Substack and all my other channels. So, all right, we have a docket prepared for everyone. So this week, what we're seeing as of this morning, there's some news about the infamous Epstein saga. There's a story out from the New York Times, which seemingly brings new evidence to light regarding the relationship between Trump and Epstein. This has been speculated on for quite some time. But as of this morning, the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday released more than 20,000 pages of documents from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. And there's this article in the New York Times this morning that reports on some of the key lines and some of the context behind it. So Noah, is this a big deal, a nothing burger, or somewhere in between?
As we were saying earlier, I don't think any intelligent person truly believed that Trump had no involvement with Epstein. Anybody who's seen the video of them together at the club with like knowing smiles at one another from the 90s can sort of put two and two together. Also, as we were saying earlier, I think that what's most interesting here is what's ancillary to the piece. Within the piece, we do find these specific emails. We have Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell talking about Trump, calling him the dog that didn't bark, referring to the fact that he has not yet revealed anything about Epstein. We have an especially interesting email, I thought, between Epstein and the author Michael Wolff, best known as the author of Fire and Fury, which is one of the better books about the first Trump administration, I think. For anybody who doesn't know it, he was a fly on the wall in the Trump White House. Trump sort of trusted him, and he just gave this really interesting account of the wars within the Trump White House, especially between the Steve Bannon faction and the Ivanka Trump faction. But anyway, so this is 2015, before Trump has made his political ascendancy. And Michael Wolff, who apparently is rather close with Epstein, says, "Oh, I have word that CNN is going to be asking you questions, is going to be asking Trump questions about you. What should we do?" And then he suggests we don't tell Trump anything. We let him, I believe the words are, hang himself. And that's to say, we find out what he says. If he denies it, that he had any connection with Epstein, then we can hang that over him. We'll play it by ear. But so I don't know. First of all, what is Michael Wolff doing in this email? Like, this is a writer, I think, often for Bloomberg. Like, why he's doing PR for Epstein? And you don't get any information. Like, that's considered not interesting in the story, but that's what I want to know about.
That's a great question. Yeah, that is interesting. I guess I'm trying to understand how incriminating this really is. It seems like the most scandalous thing here is, as of today, that it seems like it's this particular line, Epstein's claim to Michael Wolff, that where he says, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls," as he asked Elaine to stop.
It sounds like something out of a David Lynch movie.
Yeah, yeah. And so, okay, so I guess this shows that Trump had some kind of knowledge of bad activities happening involving girls, and it shows that, you know, Trump was privy to this, and also that he had some sort of guilty conscience about it and wanted it to stop or something. And so, but I guess it's still kind of ambiguous what it's referring to exactly. Yes. Like there's very different levels of sort of wrongdoing that he could or could not have been privy to. So what do you think?
Yeah, that question, right. That's still ambiguous. I think it's clear that these messages are being released to be as damaging as possible to Trump. It's clear that in one of the cases where the victim's name is redacted and replaced with a victim, it is referring to Virginia, I believe you say Giuffre, one of the more famous Epstein victims, who explicitly said that she didn't believe Trump was involved with anything. She had sort of exculpated him, as it were. Whether she was lying or not is anybody's guess. But so, you know, that's already a little manipulative to say just victim, but actually it's this person who has explicitly said Trump has no involvement, to my knowledge. So I don't think it's the most damaging thing for Trump. I also personally, I think it's absurd to imagine that Trump had no knowledge of young girls in the Epstein orbit giving massages and or exchanging sexual favors for money. I think, yeah, I just find that incredible. But
so let me ask you this. What is your overall view of the Epstein situation at this point in time? And I'll tell you briefly mine. I mean, I think throughout the whole past few years of this being a hot topic, I would say I was a somewhat interested but relatively distant observer. I never went super deep into it, but I will say that I read the first volume of the Whitney Webb book. I don't know if you know of her.
Okay, yeah, I do know of her.
Yeah, she's an interesting case. So it's, on one level, the book is very well researched, but it is also kind of quite literally that It's Always Sunny meme of piecing together the you know, the connections. I mean, that is like really quite literally what she's doing. So it is like a well researched piece of work in the sense that it brings together a lot of data, which I think is well sourced and more or less accurate. And when you read that book, you definitely get a strong impression, like that, you know, Epstein is very close to a wide variety of dubious and criminal activities and individuals, you know, but there is not really, even in her, you know, very meticulously researched and very kind of anti-Epstein perspective, even there's not really smoking guns. And so I sort of read that book with interest, but also with some hesitation and caution, because it definitely shows there's all kinds of naughty stuff happening in his kind of like social network orbits. But at the same time, you do have to it is kind of this, you know, fairly circumstantial case, basically. And so watching it over time, I kind of I haven't really taken a strong position one way or the other. I think it's so ideologically contentious. It seems like people really, really want to think that Epstein is this, you know, very systematic, evil, villain, and he and Ghislaine are orchestrating this international criminal network of human trafficking and sex trafficking and pedophilia and all of these things. My current view is that probably the extreme populist sort of interpretation of the Epstein situation is probably unjustified and probably a bit overstated, but also, obviously, as you were saying, like there's sort of unwholesome activities and behaviors happening with a fairly high density in his network. So I think the reality is probably pretty unsatisfying for the kind of, a hot button internet hive mind. It's probably, like many things, somewhere in the middle. Like there's bad behavior going on. These are creepy, gross, powerful people who are hedonistic, and I'm sure several specific crimes of some kind took place where things cross the line of legality, and are even short of that are highly sort of disgusting and problematic or whatnot. I'm sure there's a high sort of density of such things in general, but also there doesn't seem to be a very strong case that Epstein is in fact, and Epstein and Ghislaine are in fact, a Mossad asset who are doing this sort of like systematic international sexual blackmailing campaign. It does not seem to be that is a really justified conclusion at this point. What do you think? What's your overall take on it?
Well, I think, interestingly, there are emails from this tranche that will bear on that.
Okay.
I haven't dug through them
Right, me neither.
thoroughly, so I can't say for certain. But you touched on something which I think is important, which is like buried in the hysteria around like, oh, is there a satanic pedophilic sex ring where he's worshiping Baal in this temple on this island? I think probably not. I think probably more standard hedonistic deeds and misdeeds. But the much more interesting question is like, who is this guy? Where did he, why is he, how is he emailing with Noam Chomsky and with, why is he emailing with Noam Chomsky, with Michael Wolff? Why has he been gifted, $1 billion or something like that by Les Wexner to buy his townhouse here in New York City? What was his job, etc.
Right.
And that's one of those things which there just seems to be very little appetite for answering those questions in the mainstream press, which is why it fuels the Mossad angle, which I don't think is an unlikely answer, but I don't see any proof.
Exactly. Right. I would not be totally surprised if a smoking gun on that topic came out and it was proven that he was a Mossad asset and this was some sort of systematic project. But that's my view as well. At this moment in time, it doesn't seem like there's sufficient evidence to infer that. And I think the base case for me is, I mean, everyone's met someone who's just really charming, really good at getting resources, is really good at making friends. I mean, everyone knows someone like this, right? I think he was just sort of like, top tier, like the 0.001% of this kind of sociopathic, hedonistic person who's just charming, fun to be around, organizes, the best parties, and it just becomes a magnet for the most sort of hedonistic, wealthy, pleasure-seeking weirdos and creeps, basically, right? I mean, and also
some really fine gentlemen.
Another layer of fairly normal people who they kind of rope in to make it all kind of like whitewashed a bit, like that. That so I'm not saying every single person who was ever in his orbit is a creep or anything, but precisely part of this kind of sociopathic strategy is you just make a lot of friends, including with good people and normal people, and you bring them all in. So technically, your character is seen as good, right? So I think that's a known type, and he was just an extreme version of it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone was in his orbit. Anybody who is anybody.
including many academics. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I
okay.
think, yeah. And then lastly, I'll just say, I think you're absolutely right. I think, much more likely than that he was specifically engaged to be getting sex tapes of all powerful people. It seems like he was just kind of a general fixer, like you wanted somebody to befriend somebody to make, grease the wheels of a deal. Epstein was your guy.
Right. And
That's
if you do that,
my best
yeah,
sense.
I think if you do that enough for someone who has billions of dollars, it's probably not totally unheard of that they just buy you a house or put you in a nice house or whatnot. So I don't know. There's a lot there. I wouldn't be too surprised if a smoking gun came out, but it's not. It's just impossible to know. And I think the base case at this point is he was just a really good sociopathic kind of manipulator and power accumulator, and a bunch of people got roped in, and bad things happened, gross things happened. But it seems like that's as much as we can say.
All right.
Yeah. All right. What's next? We got a docket here. What's next, Noah?
Yes. Next, we have the most fun controversy, the Sydney Sweeney controversy. That's next on our docket, right?
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So this has to be, this was a wonderfully viral tweet that you did.
Oh yeah, this did numbers. This guy, I think this is at I tweeted this like a couple days ago. I think it's almost at 10 million views.
Yeah.
Surprisingly controversial to me. It was like sort of obvious actually when I watched it.
So tell us,
why don't you set it? Yeah, go ahead, set it up.
Interview between Sydney Sweeney and a journalist. Why were people piling on to the journalist, and what insight did you have into that?
So okay, right. So this interviewer, her name is Catherine Stoffel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and she runs the GQ features, and she did this interview, and I saw it before it went viral, or maybe as it was going viral, but before I saw any of the replies. And when I watched it, I genuinely did not think it was that bad. And in fact, frankly, my personal intuition, my immediate response was the opposite of the one that ended up going viral, which is that I was actually struck at the time by how she was asking this question about this, very, very, explosive, kind of woke topic of course, the pretext here is Sydney Sweeney's jeans ad that she did a few weeks or months ago, where she says, I have great genes, or I have good genes, whatever it was. And this was, very viral for the obvious reason that she's this beautiful white woman with good genetics. And, she's for a white woman to say, I have great genes.
There's something taboo about that somehow.
Yeah. No, it definitely was at the time. I thought it was a provocative ad. I mean, the double entendre there is obvious and it's provocative. And when I saw that ad happen, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's a milestone in the kind of post woke sort of, transition that I think we're in now. And so I thought, okay, interesting, whatever. But I didn't get involved in that debate then, but that was the background here for everyone listening. So in this recent interview with GQ, Catherine asks Sydney Sweeney, she basically just says, hey, that happened. It was a big viral, sensation. Everyone was talking about it and wondering about it. What do you think about that? Did you have any reflections on that? Anything you want to say about that? And I thought, watching Catherine ask that question, I thought to myself, well, this is really cool, actually. Like, this interviewer is not really digging in. She's not really being a woke scold. She's actually just asking pretty open-mindedly and pretty generously, hey, this sensational viral moment happened a few months ago. It was pretty interesting. Do you have any reply to that? And she just rehearsed the common criticism. So I have it right here. What she said was, quote, the criticism of the content was basically that maybe specifically in this political climate, white people shouldn't joke about genetic superiority. So she is faithfully and very correctly just representing what the popular outrage position was. And then she's just tees it up to Sydney and says, kind of, do you want to reply to that? Or do you have any thoughts on that? And I was struck by how non-moralistic it was. And I was watching Catherine ask this. I thought to myself, wow, that we really are going further in this kind of post-woke transition. Like, this interviewer would sound very different 5 years ago. And so then when I saw everyone was going viral, and the big kind of meme was, oh, look at this woke scold. She's so out of touch. She's so condescending. She's so smug. And look at Sydney Sweeney, totally put her in her place, mic drop. like when I saw that kind of viral template be the one that stuck, I immediately was like, no, this is fundamentally a misreading. And so I did some research. I went into the literature on facial expressions, because this stuff has been studied. I mean, people have spent a lot of time and effort over many years understanding the physical, features of the face. And something people should understand that's not always obvious to people, that emotions, colloquially, we talk about emotions as if they're kind of internal states. They're like the feeling that you have. That's not what an emotion is. Technically, an emotion is actually an involuntary physical response to something. And so the expressions that your face makes, the eyebrows, the lips, every bit of the face, it's actually involuntary, and it is a faithful reflection of the person's emotions, which are, as I said, not actually an internal feeling state. Feelings are separable from emotions, and a lot of people don't know this. So what this means is that if you encounter this kind of interview or kind of cultural question in media, you can actually just go to the books and you can actually get an objective, refined, and direct sort of insight into what actually someone is conveying, or what their emotional state is when they're asking questions. So I went into it and I looked, and my intuition was totally right. It was immediately clear to me that my intuition was right. The entire world was wrong. And in fact, when you look at these viral photos, an objective scientific analysis shows very clearly that these are actually sympathetic gestures. They're what you would call affiliative gestures. And you can break it down, by the kind of square inch of the face. That these are, so the pictures that are going viral of these faces she's making, they're being described as and kind of hostilely called, condescending, smug, whatever, things like that. And it's basically wrong. These are, the first one is a what you would call an affiliative amused smile. So that's just basically like a friendly posture that she's making, also with her head forward. That's like, it's like girlfriends who like each other talking and supporting each other. That's what that first one says. And then the second one is what you call a sympathy wince, also known as a sorry smile. And in that one, it does look more like, I can understand why people would think that it looks condescending, but in the context, it's actually, she's kind of saying, oh, I can't believe this happened to you. Like, they're so crazy. Like the kind of judgmental face that she's making is actually directed towards the popular critique that she had to kind of suffer through, if anything. And now, obviously, this is all reading a lot into it, but so are the viral, haters. And so the case that I just made is actually like much more likely. It's much more plausible. It's much more consistent with everything we know about facial expressions. And it was also my intuitive interpretation, which also means that it's certainly right and the world is wrong. So that was what I tweeted about. Basically, I kind of broke this down.
When I
and the internet does not like it, but some smart people, a lot of smart people replied, and they agreed with me.
Well, first off, Sympathy Wince would be a great name for a new indie rock band.
Second
of all, I thought,
what'd you think?
that this wasn't an attempted gotcha. It almost had the form of a gotcha in order to potentially create a viral moment without having that actual gotcha. You can compare it to, I was watching clips of the ladies of The View going after Cheryl Hines, who is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s wife. And that's a case where it's like, no, they're not going to let her off the hook. They're going to impute negative things to her, cut her off when she's answering, go to commercial break. Like, there's a there's a strategy for this. We know how to do this if we want to make you look as bad as possible. And this is clearly not what was happening with Sydney Sweeney, because even if Sydney Sweeney is perhaps a little bit right-wing, which is what people seem to be feeling in their spidey senses, she's still cool. She's still a movie star, and people want to be friends with her if they're journalists getting the opportunity to talk to her. Yeah.
Well, for what it's worth, I mean, I think it's obvious she's playing it perfectly. I mean, I think being totally coy about it and not explicitly being right wing in any way, but also being very, very willful about not disavowing the right wing at all is obviously the top strategy. I mean, I think she's owning everything because of that. So all the crazy right wing people can can be fully convinced that, you know, she's their girl, and but she doesn't really take on any risk, and she's not. I mean, she would totally sully herself if she got political, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, people thought the same way about Taylor Swift for a long time. There was a long time, you know, belief that maybe she was a real.
To me, though, she hits very different, in my opinion. Like, she comes off to me very different. I wonder what your intuition is, but her she comes off as evasive and fearful and risk averse and fake. Frankly, I mean, I know that's controversial. I know a lot of people love her, and I'm not hating. I'm just saying I don't really care one way or another. But
you don't want the Swifties after you.
But I'm just saying, personally, she comes off as very fake and empty and kind of lame to me. Whereas Sydney Sweeney comes off as kind of more knowingly kind of careful and subtle, in a way that, like, she has that kind of knowing smile, which is totally different than Taylor Swift's kind of like, oh, I'm just like a nice girl, I don't, you know, want to hurt, you know. It's very different. Do you agree? I
do agree, but, you know, Sydney Sweeney's an actor. We can't trust actors.
True. That's true. Okay, well, did we cover that topic? I mean, people seem really activated about that, so thank you for bringing up my tweet.
Oh, good, on this. Good. I'm not seeing the comments. I'm glad they're activated.
So another thing that I think we should talk about is something that is always seemingly in the debates each week, which is contemporary literary fiction. Now, this is your wheelhouse, so I'm gonna tee this one up to you. But there was this one tweet from this week by someone named Maya. Looks like Maya Mindell, and she says the following: contemporary literary fiction, 33%. I'm a grad student from Oberlin, and this is my situationship with a professor, end quote. 33%, quote, I'm a novelist getting a divorce from another novelist, end quote. And then 33%, I am a member of insert marginalized group, and this is my trauma dump, end quote. And then the final one is 1% actually good stuff. Now, that does not add up to 100%. I'm afraid it adds up to, oh no, it does actually. Yeah, never mind. No, for a second, I thought she went to 101%, but no, she's totally right. Do you agree or disagree, or why did this go viral? Now, I'm not really in this world at all, so why don't you start by what is the larger debate here? Like, why is this so sensational to people, and what's going on here? And then what do you think?
Yeah, it's tough because there's so much more discourse about literary fiction as an abstract subject than there is discourse about specific items of literary fiction. As an author of a book of literary fiction, it's sometimes a little bit dispiriting. And yet, we keep doing it, and we keep doing it because there's much that's hidden or kept from the way books are discussed in mainstream outlets. We haven't really readjusted our expectations. But okay, is this tweet accurate? I think it's directionally correct. I saw somebody point out saying grad student from Oberlin is sort of like that scene in Inglourious Bastards where he holds up his hand with the 3 the wrong way, indicating that he's not really one of them. Okay, it wouldn't be a grad student from Oberlin. I don't know if Oberlin even has grad students, maybe in the conservatory. But there's definitely a glut of sort of plotless, depressed, not very exciting or redeeming novels about the contemporary world from both men and women. I think in the last 10 or 15 years, probably more from women. This is not something that started with woke. There's a great book by one of my favorite philosophers, Colin Wilson, called The Age of Defeat. He wrote this, I think, in the late 50s, and he was writing specifically about this problem. He was talking about the existentialist novelists, other novelists, but why is it that when we try to write imaginative fiction in the contemporary world, it's so often in an ironical mode? It's so often about people who fail, who are defeated. Why can we not find it in ourselves to even imagine stories of great heroes and their victories? So that's just a broader philosophical question. I'm a novelist getting a divorce from another novelist. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of kind of inside baseball, as it were. Writers writing about writing. The reason for that is that your book is going to be published these days if you are a writer with a track record. It's really hard to get a novel out if you're a new author of literary fiction. It's sort of stuck culture. We're just like, if you got grandfathered in before like 2000, we'll keep publishing your books, but otherwise, you're kind of screwed. And so those people who were grandfathered in tend to be professors of creative writing at, various universities. So when they write their books, what is it going to be about? It's going to be about, divorcing your writer husband for another writer husband. 33%, I am a member, and this is my trauma dump. Yeah, it's the age of trauma. These past 20 years, people love trauma, essays about trauma, novels about trauma. There was an essay recently, I remember thinking it was quite good. It was possibly in N+1, maybe not. I think it was called The Trauma Plot, and it was about the use of trauma in fiction to explain a character's motivations. It's just, I think that's a trend that'll pass away. But yeah, there's the mechanism for sorting out great work from trendy work or from work by people whose names are known, even if they're not doing great work today. Those mechanisms aren't really working very well, in my opinion. Maybe it's always been like that, but I think probably it's a little bit worse today than it has been in the past. What do you think? You probably think about this from the standpoint of somebody who writes books of philosophy, who is on this other side of the publishing industry.
I just have such little exposure to I just don't read that much fiction, frankly, and people make fun of me for this, and they should, but I'm honest about it. I mean, I've always been focused on social science and philosophy and nonfiction, and I'm busy. And so it's hard enough, as everyone knows, it's hard enough to read high quality books frequently on the topics that matter to you. So I've accepted it. I've leaned into it. I don't pretend to be I don't pretend to have any interesting or expert views on literature. I mean, obviously I've read a lot of, classic novels and stuff like that, but I do not keep up whatsoever with contemporary fiction. But I will say this, and I'll kind of put this as a question to you, since you just published a novel, and I'm sure I haven't had the chance to read it yet, but I'm sure you would agree that it's in that 1% of actually good stuff. Although I'm curious if it dabbles in any of the other 33% that we've discussed here.
It kind of does. I think, you could say, you could put it as a little bit guilty of trauma and a little bit guilty of, the main character is an intellectual and a former academic, but she's gone into the tech world. So, okay. Maybe there's a little bit of grad studentiness in it.
I mean, what I would say is that obviously every time and place is going to tend towards certain topics and themes for, just due to the objective, situation and the structures at that time. So that alone, the fact that there might be these sort of broad camps that contemporary literary fiction falls into is not necessarily damning or indicting. And I think, the critique sounds like it makes sense because these are the types of things that people, the types of people who aspire to write, contemporary literary fiction, this is the kind of, sociological state of those types of people. So that alone, this alone doesn't strike me as damning. But what the topic that I find interesting here with all this constant discourse around, I mean, people are always complaining about, the state of fiction and where's the great American novelist. And there's all of this sort of like navel gazing, complaining about, where are the great writers, blah, blah, blah. You see this in different fields. And I don't know. I feel very, these questions and this discourse never resonates with me because I don't know. I mean, I feel like a lot of my friends are brilliant, smart people writing all kinds of cool stuff. And where I'm sitting, I'm surrounded by brilliant writing all the time. Like I genuinely feel like we're in a period of tremendous greatness and vitality and amazing writers all over the place, writing books of all kinds of weird types and publishing them themselves or publishing them through publishers, whatever the case might be, writing on Substack, obviously, writing newsletters, writing all kinds of stuff, right? And so I don't know, I'm much more, I think, favorable and optimistic and positive. And this sort of like constant complaining, it seems like such a kind of popular mode of discourse that it always goes viral. People love to complain. A lot of people seem to identify with this, but I don't know. Like I look at you, for instance, like, you're running the Mars Review, you have other things you're building and things going on, and you managed to write, a novel that, as I said, I haven't read it, but I know you well enough to know that I'm sure you put your heart into it. I'm sure it's as authentic and as, kind of faithful to a sophisticated aesthetic vision as could possibly be. And then I think about people, like our friend Jordan Castro and people like that, and or like Annika, I don't know. I look around my social networks, I'm like, there's lots of cool, interesting people writing cool, interesting stuff and doing so, thoughtfully and with great energy and verve. So it's like, sure, I guess if you're like super invested in insider debates about, the sociology of literature, then this kind of stuff is fun to talk about or to say. But from my perspective, I don't know. I'm not seeing it. Am I missing something?
Well, there are two separate issues. So one is the actual content of what's being produced, and that gets discussed least. But I think what the other thing to talk about is the careers of writers. Can you be a writer and make a living writing? The answer to that question has become a lot more negative in the last 25, 30 years. This is often what people are complaining about. I don't think it serves one to complain, although you can go viral from it, so maybe it does serve one. But yeah, I mean, I think the complaints are generally accurate. Like 30, 35 years ago, it was much easier to get, one of these nice cushy jobs teaching creative writing. If you have a first book or a second book that is critically acclaimed. It doesn't even have to sell. It just has to be critically acclaimed. Then you can get one of these jobs. From my experience, back in the day, there would be books departments in newspapers. So the book I publish, it has major distribution. It's in bookstores. I would have liked to see something like, if not the New York Times, maybe my hometown Boston Globe, in their book review pages, doing a book review. That used to happen. That's not happening anymore. It's not a conspiracy. It's because, they've cut those departments. I don't know if the Globe has a book section anymore. If they do, just barely. And so for all these things that used to help writers, there's less spots for them. And I think it is perfectly accurate to say that those spots are more likely today, far more likely to go to somebody who checks as many DEI boxes as possible. I think that's just true. It doesn't, it can be said without rancor. But the last thing I'll say is I think the overarching complaint is the general mechanism that used to be able to make you a literary celebrity. That just doesn't happen anymore, right? So everybody is less of a writer than a content creator. We're all in the same pit creating content. And if you can create a lot of content and get a lot of readers, then you can succeed that way. But it used to be you come out with the debut novel, it's critically acclaimed. There's this whole apparatus, New York Magazine, the New York Times. You get kind of anointed. And
Right.
that's not happening anymore. And because that's not happening anymore, people are sort of assuming, I'm sorry, I'm kind of ranting now,
No,
but
it's good.
people are assuming that there aren't real artists anymore. This is what grinds my gears. I
Mhm.
keep seeing these different tweets. Oh, Dime Square produced no real artists. There are no real artists in this age. There are no real writers. No, I think when you say that, you're telling on yourself as somebody who can only see a real artist as somebody who's a literary celebrity, right?
Mhm.
We're not making Thomas Pynchons anymore, because to make a Thomas Pynchon, you need that apparatus to say, oh, this is a great writer. That apparatus doesn't exist anymore. So you're going to have to decide on your own who's a great writer.
Right.
And you're going to have an opinion that not everybody shares with you and defend it. And nobody wants to do that because nobody actually fucking reads. Sorry.
So I think you're picking up on something really important. This is non-obvious, but really crucial to this debate here, which is that in some ways, if there is a dearth of truly great, exceptional writers, it's only due to the fact that the thoughtful reading public, to the degree it exists, is so convinced that there's no one really great, right? So it's like, what I think the model here is actually that, the mainstream media used to tell the larger thoughtful reading public who's really good. And then all the thoughtful reading public would buy into that. They would invest themselves emotionally. They would buy the books, but they would also just kind of like, they needed the mainstream media to authorize them to like really admire and adore some writer. And then what's happened is that with the mainstream media being flattened out by decentralized media, now the thoughtful reading public, I'm talking about sort of like the average sort of, educated, thoughtful person, but who's not like a tastemaker. They're not, really making independent judgments for themselves in a sophisticated way, but they're smart enough to read real books, and they're smart enough to appreciate. If someone could tell them what's really good, they're smart enough to kind of appreciate it and to get excited by it and to respect it. I think that larger mass of readers is lost, basically. Exactly. And so they're not able to invest collectively. Like the educated herd is not converging on stars. And so those people feel like what that means is there's no great art, when in fact, they're, as you say, telling on themselves that they can't love something unless the mainstream media is authenticating it for them and telling them to love it. So it's really the people who complain are the ones who are telling on themselves, I think, because there's amazing, incredibly interesting, cool, weird stuff all over the place. What we need to do is, if you actually have discerning taste, find the weird small stuff that you love, and then make that person feel like a star. You need to gas up that person to make them more confident so that they can take bigger and bigger swings. Because that's what the mainstream media used to do, is like, if you got anointed with your first book, then you'd feel confident, right? You'd feel powerful. You'd feel like, okay, now I can do something maximalist and crazy. And I know there's going to be an audience there because the media is behind me. So in a way, what we're really lacking is sort of this like hype. What we needed to do is build our own decentralized kind of hype machines, because it's this combination of both attention and respect, but it's also a matter of hyping up the artist and the writer to feel like they can do bigger and better and crazier things. And so it's like this complex sociological machinery that is broken down with the mainstream media breaking down, but the talent is still there. The energy and the verve is still there. What we really need to recreate is the kind of sociological machinery that hypes people up to themselves and to others and gets them kind of fully maximizing their potential.
I think that's right. And, okay, maybe someone would like to argue that the talent isn't there anymore, or that at the very least it's considerably less than it was in ages past. In that case, if you're going to make that claim, I would love to see a good faith effort of like, okay, these are the 10 writers from today that I've heard the most good things about. I'm going to compare their prose with the 10 writers, with Thomas Pynchon and Don DeLillo, right, and show why these 10 writers are so inferior. But I never see that.
That's because no one has the sort of it's either a lack of the discernment or it's a lack of the energy and the time to do this work. But that's exactly why they don't get the nice things that they want, right? Because there's that dearth of kind of collective investment, right? Yeah. So I think that this is like a really, really non-trivial and non-obvious point. And And I think that, that's something that I think you and I kind of have in common, because we're interested in sort of, doing whatever we can to build cool things and try to make the most of the decentralized culture. And what I will also say, and then maybe we can move on, is the other really important point here, I think, is that the decentralization of media has had trade-offs. Like, it is true, the media can no longer king make you and make you a literary superstar. But way more people can do it, and more people have a shot at it, basically. Like, the big problem with that structure, sure, it was great if you were lucky enough to be the anointed one. But that's like, a very small number of people who got anointed in that way. And the actual criteria for getting anointed that way is not, I think it was a very noisy process. It has a lot to do with, like, are you political enough to are you ambitious enough? And did you, rub elbows with the right people? Like, it's selected for a certain kind of,
rub more than elbows.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So I think, like, that was exerting a very strong selection effect that is not probably fully appreciated. And so I would personally rather have the current situation. Like, as a writer, I'd much rather be born into the current world, where if you have talent and energy, like, you can take a stab at producing almost anything. And if it's half decent, you really can get a hearing. You get some degree of audience, and that doesn't mean you're going to be famous. It doesn't mean you can, like, live off of it necessarily, but you do have a shot you at least have a shot at achieving that and of producing meaningful work that you're proud of. And in a way where, like, in the previous mainstream media system, like, if you couldn't get that big publisher to, approvingly gatekeep you, then you couldn't do anything, really. It wasn't even worth trying to do anything, right? So I'd much rather have our current situation, but it does raise just a new challenge. I just think it just changes the game for us. It changes the game board and creates a new challenge, which is what I was saying, which is, like, we have to learn to do truly great things on the outside in this decentralized sphere. And then we need to have the energy and the verve to push it forward. And then we just have to build our own, basically, decentralized systems that provide all the social, psychological sort of machinery to get to the next level. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now, is we don't have that machinery yet, but people are building, like, a lot of people are working on this. And I think, this is where the culture will evolve to, personally.
That's sort of what the Andreessen new media doc is about. Did you read that? Sorry.
Yeah, I did. I think a lot of people are recognizing this. I mean, in my own way, my community that I've been building for like 6 years, the indie scholars community, like, that is my own little spin on that. I mean, I think what you've done with the Mars Review is also a spin on this. And I think a lot of people are coming to this intuition and are building the structures that will kind of produce, like, the next generation of next level stuff. But it's just going to take a lot of searching and sorting and testing, I think.
Yeah. I'll move on, but I'll just say my only fear is, if in order to create these hype machines, we have to do so very much posting, will we have the energy or the brain cells left to do great work? And can our posting about real work compete with, cat videos and AI gooning?
Well, I think this is a huge conversation, so I won't open it up either. But I do think like a big part of the answer here, and this could be another conversation, AI is going to matter a lot on exactly.
Yes.
I mean, it's a huge question here, and it's complicated. And I don't pretend that there's an easy answer here, but I have a strong intuition that AI is a big part of the answer to that question, because basically what it looks to me like is a lot of the mechanical labor, like the legwork, the kind of manual labor, the legwork involved in the world of ideas and arts and letters. A lot of the legwork is going to be automatable, not the original stuff, not the thinking, not what's human, not what's properly human and creative and original. Obviously that will stay, the human mind I think will be king for a very long time. But being able to like do a fraction of the more manual mechanistic labors that are involved in content creation or production, including even highbrow writing. If you think AI is not going to touch any of it at all, I think you're nuts and retarded, frankly, and like really coping hard, frankly. I think if that's someone's view, of course the devil will be in the details of how you draw those lines and how to do that thoughtfully and discerningly. That's my take.
No, that sounds right to me. Well, this segues us a little bit into our next section, because we're talking about, in part about how much dopamine can be triggered by these, AI videos, AI porn, all this very, addictive stuff. And so we have this question, the man question, that gets brought up regularly in the press. Lately, we've had a couple pieces. One in the New Yorker, What Did Men Do to Deserve This, by Jessica Winter. And lately, we've also had a piece on Substack from Derek Thompson. They're looking at the same issue. Is there a male loneliness crisis? If so, what should be done about it? Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, so we looked at two pieces this week on this topic, another recurring huge topic, of course. And why don't we kind of go in order, or I'll give people a very quick, very broad overview of the two pieces. So this piece by Jessica Winter, it's nominally a review of a new book from Scott Galloway on the man problem, and she kind of diagnoses Scott Galloway's perspective as emblematic of a larger sort of centrist manosphere, if you will, where it's it's not like the old pickup artist stuff or the kind of nasty, angry incel stuff. It's this sort of polished, respectable, friendly kind of new sort of register, if you will, around the problems of men today, which kind of points to all of the key well-known metrics around how men are not doing so well today. But it's not anti-woman, it's not angry, or it's not particularly angry or nasty or anything like that. It's been sort of made centrist and respectable by people like Scott Galloway. And so it's a review of that book. And I think the larger thrust of her perspective, which I frankly like and agree with, and we'll kind of expand on it a little bit, is that the problem is kind of misdiagnosed. Like there is a kind of fixation on how men have it so bad today, whereas when you actually look at the metrics that people cite, it's actually much more ambiguous and much more kind of multifaceted, and involving, for instance, for every man problem, there's sort of almost by definition a woman problem, because men and women are supposed to get married and have kids. So it's like, if you can find any metric where like men are totally, screwed, it is actually a fair thing to say that women are probably being screwed in some way, or something weird and toxic and suboptimal is happening to women as well, because it takes two to tango to have, a healthy family, basically. So I think that that's the larger thrust of her piece, which is that, maybe we fixate a little bit too much on the so-called man problem, and it's actually much thornier and weirder. What's really going on under the hood is actually more complicated and actually affects men and women together in different ways that the man conversation kind of neglects. I think I generally agree with that, actually, and I think that's a fair critique. Now, the piece by Derek Thompson is a little bit more about kind of the lifestyle and practices of men today, and it's got the great title of The Monks in the Casino, and that's a great title because the monk refers to the fact that men today, young men especially, are they've kind of stopped doing a lot of the old vices that have been traditionally associated with men. They don't drink as much. They're not, going out as much in different ways. I think things like, violence and like stuff like that are probably down. I mean, he doesn't talk about this exactly, but if you've ever, for anyone who's like a millennial, if you've ever, if your dad has ever like told you stories about the kinds of trouble they would get into when they were teenagers, I mean, it's like very, very crazy. Or like you can watch any movie from the 70s, right? And there's like, men, like a random, 17-year-old man in a movie in the 70s, like, accidentally kills a guy in a bar and then has to like flee to Tijuana or whatever. It's like, not that was normal, but like that was not unheard of, basically. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And so, but nowadays it's unheard of. Like it's like no 17-year-old white kid that anyone here knows, like, accidentally murders a guy because they get into a fight at a bar and he has to kind of run town or something like this, right? This doesn't happen. And so he's pointing to the fact that young men in many ways have become much less vice oriented, and they kind of live like monks, but they're also in other ways sort of getting really trapped in other kinds of vices and temptations. And that's the casino part of it. Obviously things like crypto trading, stock trading, all kinds of gambling are now far more popular. This has been one of the most significant kind of cultural shifts in recent decades, but really in recent years, especially with the legalization of gambling. So now, obviously, many people know sports gambling is everywhere. Every single sport now pretty much is dominated by gambling. It's built into the video screens that you see when you watch things. You have Polymarket, so there's prediction markets. There, you name it: Robinhood, Polymarket, crypto. Crypto trading seen as a way of getting wealthy. Sort of an insane, fact of life, and a lot of young men are trying to do this kind of thing. And so it's a great title, The Monks in the Casino, because that is a very pithy way of describing the situation of a large swath of young men today, both monks, but living in a casino. So yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting to look at these two pieces together. So as I said about the first one, I think it's actually directionally correct and fair, and I think the second one also is directionally correct and fair. And so I think they kind of speak to the same point, which is that it really, like, we are actually dealing with like very much deeper civilization tier problems, and it is actually much bigger than men per se. And I actually think, for what it's worth, this discourse has become very unpopular, but I think the relatively old school kind of so-called cultural Marxism here is actually pretty astute. I mean, Adorno, I think, was onto this kind of stuff better than anyone else. I think, like, the fact is that the problem is capitalism, frankly. I mean, like, we live in like a hyper marketized society where you cannot survive by accident. Like, so if you accidentally kill a guy and have to run to Tijuana, we'd all agree that's a bad thing. We'd like to see less murder. And our highly efficient markets and rationalized society has gotten very good at preventing people from murdering. Like, you can't get, like, so to just take that as an example, like, the one reason you don't see that anymore is that you can't get away with it. You go to Tijuana, they're going to hunt you down, right? We have cell phones, everything's like, there's surveillance, there's GPS, there's social media. Like, so in a way, like, our society has become so rational and it has become so efficient that we've basically prohibited a lot of forms of vitality, basically. And like, testosterone is this double-edged sword where, like, we want our men to be healthy and vigorous and to take action and to build things and to be strong, right? But actually, as a society, we don't want that, because that's also correlated with accidental murders. And like, testosterone is this double-edged sword, right? And our society, so like, people complain about the decline. People complain about the decline of testosterone, but in fact, our safety-oriented, rational, capitalist, liberal American society, like, we actually don't want testosterone. Like, we have rationalized. We have rationalized our society to such a degree. We want safety, we want peace and order, and that kind of snuffs out all the life, the dangerous life. Like, life is dangerous, right? So, I think Adorno is basically right here. Like, this is like, and I think all of these symptoms that are being analyzed are really, like, most parsimoniously understood as symptoms of a hyper rationalized capitalism that has become so efficient at prohibiting and excluding and sort of suppressing anything that does not create value. And so to create value, you have to basically optimize everything. You can't drink, you can't be out partying, you can't accidentally kill a guy and run to Tijuana. So, like, you have to live this, like, highly oppressed, kind of fake nerfed life just to survive and to create shareholder value, just have a chance of, like, being able to live materially, right? Then I think that just causes all of these problems. Like, it's why people aren't getting married in some way, because women now have to work. Like, women are basically, like, labor is being extracted out of feminism. Basically, just got women the right for capitalism to exploit them labor wise, as much as, like, men were being exploited. So I think this is actually, like, the most, if you really wanted one parsimonious theory of everything here, it is actually, like, the so-called cultural Marxists and the Frankfurt School were actually really right about a lot of this, I think.
No, I think that's exactly right. That the base cause here is, whether we call it capitalism or bureaucracy or technology, whatever matrix of these things that we want
Rationalization.
yeah,
That's like Weber's. That's
rationalization.
Weber's term. It's like
Okay, yeah.
modernity is rationalization. Basically, it's instrumental rationalization,
Yes.
and that sort of includes capitalism and bureaucracy. So it's sort of like it's more general than the left and the right, because capitalism and bureaucracy are both sort of expressions of this like very civilization grade sort of historical trend. But go on.
That's right. And yeah, and even Marx said, yeah, you know, capitalism will, you know, eliminate these grand passions, family ties, like all these things. And we're certainly seeing that. What we're not seeing is a path out of that. We're seeing a hyper acceleration of that path. I think in the last 5 years, I would say, since COVID. I mean, it's been really fascinating to watch the acceleration of that, especially in terms of gambling on things. You know, the early cypherpunks were talking about assassination markets as being these very important features of the future. I don't know if we're going to see that yet, but it does seem to be the logical conclusion of something like Polymarket and Kalshi. You know, I don't know if that brings back any vigor and vitality to our society, or if it's just an equally shadowy and deracinated type of violence. But yeah, I think, you know, listen, it's not just a problem for men, it's a problem for everybody that we're being so efficiently made cogs in a managed society. I don't have a solution other than the solution from this great science fiction novel by Robert Graves, where eventually people get so tired of the technological society that they form a little bubble on an island somewhere, and then the world where none of this is allowed, and then the world gets so much worse elsewhere that everybody gradually comes to their bubble, and the worst elements of technology have been totally forgotten.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, I like that. I feel like I do kind of have a solution in the sense that, I mean, my intuition, I feel like you might share something similar, is that, so I do think that crypto plays a really crucial role here, which you're kind of starting to see because, you know, the casino is in large part, you know, associated and correlated with crypto right now. But like the way that when you look at crypto as a technical sort of innovation in the history of technology, it's like it does look like something that could potentially solve a lot of these problems at a properly kind of civilization tier. Because if you look at something like money, like the simplest example of this is just money, looking at money before Bitcoin and the nature of money after Bitcoin. So, you know, Bitcoin is hard money. It's provably kind of programmably immutable, like code that is hard money, which doesn't change. You can look at it. You can prove basically that it is a hard money entity. And that simple technological innovation, which was only really possible with cryptography, like it had to be like the primitives had to be discovered. They had to be figured out and tested. And it was only, you know, very recently that humans figured out how to actually instantiate hard money on the internet. And so with that simple innovation, what it is and what it's done and what it's doing is it basically sucks all the air out of the fake money that was existing before it. Basically, like fiat money before Bitcoin, it was the only game in town, and it was the top game in town because there was no robust reproducible way to install truth and constraint into that system, right? And so money like is just sort of this thing that was like infinitely pliable, and you could inflate it as much as you wanted. And you have this entire like American kind of hegemonic order that is based on the United States government ability to kind of control this like very mutable, pliable, socially kind of corrupted fake thing, right? That you could just inflate as much as you want. And so like that's I think a really compelling sort of demonstration proof, or like a kind of piece of evidence that shows like this crypto stuff is civilization level sort of disruptive, and B, that it can basically undercut and solve like really, really base level general kind of forms of corruption and confusion and badness that are kind of piled up and accumulated on each other through like a long history of kind of lies and kind of weak structures that were exploited in a way that accumulated over time. And so I think when you look at that, it makes sense that a lot of the people who are, these monks in the casino, the way the young men feel like they have to like trade crypto to be able to like ever, be materially secure. There's in other words, there's a kernel of truth to that. I think like people kind of sense this crypto stuff is actually fundamentally disruptive. It is going to represent a massive kind of generational shift of resources. And people, I think young men are actually correct to sense that this is kind of like, it's kind of like getting on a boat in, the 1800s or something to go to America from Europe, right? It's like, it does make sense objectively, and it's rational and even correct for young men to sense like this crypto stuff is a frontier that I need to be on, because this is how, the winners of the next generation are going to be, this is where they're going to be living. This is where the opportunity is. So I think a lot of that is actually objective and correct. The problem is that we're still in the early innings of it. So a lot of the first stuff is just like scammy, crappy, totally fake and dubious. But obviously, that's why we're building Nockchain, baby. That's why we've been working so hard on this for 2 years, because we really do believe that crypto does represent this promise of kind of hardcore rectification of truths in multiple domains. And we think zero knowledge proofs are really the next frontier, just like what Bitcoin did to money. Zero knowledge proofs are like the great next discovery that has not yet been fully commercialized. It has not yet been sort of instantiated in a way that can fundamentally change the social fabric in the way that Bitcoin did. So that's our bet. But I think many other people are making bets like that as well. And I think this crypto stuff is actually going to rectify a lot of this. And if you squint, you can kind of see what I mean, I think, because like, basically, if people can build families and they can kind of secure their assets and they can secure their media, they can secure their information diets, they can secure their savings in a way that's not being inflated away, in a fully maximalist kind of Nockchain universe, we envision people are going to have like very fine-grained controls over what information packets even hit their computer or hit their family TV screen. Like at the point where we can really take control over sort of the cognitive chaos and the various sort of info hazards and all the people out there who want to kind of destroy your mind or brainwash you or whatever. And if we can get control over that and sovereignty over that in the same way Bitcoin has enabled us to get sovereignty over money, I think we really are getting to this future where families and tribes and firms are going to be able to like have tremendously secure and abundant communities and families and different types of formations as this kind of island that you're talking about. I don't think it's going to be sci-fi. I think people are going to actually build their own little islands, build their own little tribes, and crypto is going to be the way that they increasingly do it at scale. Like you're going to be actually able to accumulate and scale it in a sustainable way, I think.
This is the dream, right? Is that we can use the best elements from our technologically advanced society to benefit us, which we, as much as what I said in the my past monologue had an anti-tech bent, obviously, we have so much to be grateful for in terms of the ways that technology have, I would say, eliminated violence. I mean, we can even look at the phones and say, the phones for all their ills probably are the greatest cause of the lessening of violence in the United States. Elsewhere, there were predictions that violence was just going to go up and up and up when it was bad in the 90s. We haven't seen that. There are various interpretations of why, but I think, why go kill somebody and run to Tijuana when, you can play Counter-Strike? Like, it's less effort and it's just as fun. That's one kind of sideways benefit of technology. But yeah, technology gets such a bad rap in the masses because it's all ad tech, because we're thinking about the ways that these large corporations are spamming us with things specifically designed to inflame us and to keep us distracted and to keep us passive and managed. But that's not the whole of software. That's not the whole of technological advance. So yeah, this cypherpunk dream of like the best of technological advances with the best of what's Lindy and traditional in terms of a flourishing society. That's to me something very exciting. I would love to see it happen in my lifetime and to contribute in some way. So, we'll see. I feel like it's sort of it feels like a dark year, but maybe maybe the light is coming. Just in terms of sentiment around the actual, transformative power of these things we're seeing. Crypto sort of devolves into meme coins, AI. Like, are we seeing lifestyle benefits from it yet, or are we sort of in the kind of the dark phase of it where it's scary and shocking and taking away our jobs, and we're yet to exactly figure out how to harness it for human flourishing? I don't know.
Right. I don't know. I mean, here my intuition is similar to how I think of the contemporary fiction debate that we had before. It's like, I think people are kind of down in a way that is not really justified. Like, I mean, these things, like, I think things are going really well, honestly. Like the crypto stuff. I mean, it's like, these are massive historical shifts that are happening that, like, the very fact that it's like happening at all on a timeline that we can sort of feel in our own lives means it's actually really fast. You know what I mean? Like, of course I take your point. Like, it will take more time, and on some level you can see it as slow, but when you zoom out, it's kind of like, for the magnitude of kind of civilization change that these tools represent, which is not even speculative, like already just looking at Bitcoin, like the amount of time it took for Bitcoin to wreak its havoc on the financial system is actually like really, really short in historical time, I feel like. And we get to kind of live through the change such that even today, like, the financial environment is totally different politically and socially and everything compared to what it was when we were, younger men. And so I'm sort of like, yeah, your point is taken, but I think when you look at it, you're kind of like, technology is going in an amazing direction, I think. And the culture, even the high culture, is going in an amazing direction. It's just chaotic, and it's hard to put a finger on. And you do have to be discerning, and you do have to put a lot of effort into like making your own decisions for what's good and what's worth doing and what's not. But I think the people who choose wisely and are like, positively oriented and, comfortable with a little bit of risk and just updating, periodically, I think it's like an incredibly bright future culturally and technologically. But maybe I'm just, an optimistic boltard.
Well, I think optimists generally fare better than pessimists, right? That's a very important psychological metric.
Well, it's been fun getting to talk with you, because I'm pretty optimistic, I guess, but on my day-to-day, I don't necessarily feel optimistic.
Right. Well, yeah, I think we both go back and forth.
This has been fun, Noah. Thank you for doing this with me. What did you think?
This was awesome. I'd be very happy to do it again. I should mention briefly, like, some of the stuff we were talking about in terms of creating these hype machines that can sort of recreate the mechanisms for artistic culture. I'm working on that in a very, very beginning sort of way with this thing called the Aleph. And you can find that at thealeph.club if you want to get involved.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, just we're thinking about how to recreate those structures for artists, investors, brands, the precise sort of mechanisms that we were just talking about not really existing. Oh, how do, that used to be able to play kingmaker for a writer or for a young musician. There's still very talented writers, there's still talented musicians, but what the world looks like for an upcoming artist today is like incredibly chaotic. Like, there's no sense of what it means to be an artist in the age of AI, when people can do very good and enjoyable AI music. What is the role of a human musician, of a human writer? How do we still create exciting work while working with these tools and not against them? So that's, so the Aleph is a startup around solving those questions.
Sick. Okay, cool. Yeah, the Aleph.club. I'm looking at it now. I'll throw that in the show notes as well. Go buy Noah's novel also. I put a link to that in the show notes as well. And cool, man. Well, this was fun. I think this was a very worthy experiment.
Yeah.
It fired me up. It's just fun. It's just fun to talk with people. It's fun to it's fun to read the news and just like pay attention to stuff because I'm, like many people, I scroll and whatever.
Yeah.
But it sucks to just be like
read the whole thing.
passive or whatever. And I write stuff on the internet, but it's another level of fun to just like actually talk about it and show up with a friend and just think stuff through and talk about what's going on. So thank you for trying this with me. And yeah, man, maybe we'll do it again. We'll talk about it. But this was cool. And thank you. I think we should probably wrap it up unless you have anything else you want to get on there.
No, subscribe to Justin's channel, all of his channels.
There we go.
Twitter, YouTube, newsletter.
Cheers, man. Okay, cool. All right. Well, let me turn off the stream, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Over and out. See you again soon.